Off. The big news this week was around LucasGames being resurrected as a brand.
Yay!
So in a massive announcement, LucasGames brand has been resurrected. Lucasfilm Games. Good correction. Lucasfilm Games. It's actually hard to say. Brand has been resurrected with new Star Wars and Indiana Jones games coming, and also some really large announcements around the whole deal that they've had with EA. So, as we all know, there was a deal that Disney did with EA as part of shifting what was LucasArts and really working with a big publisher. And they did a 10-year agreement with EA back in 2013 that expires in 2023. And that was to have the exclusive license to what I'd probably say is AAA Star Wars games. So there have been other Star Wars games, not from EA, but not any tentpole summer releases or anything of that order. So the news this week was quite large, as we also had an announcement that there will be a new open world Star Wars game made by Ubisoft's Massive Entertainment. So the folk that make The Division.
Interesting.
And then, on the other hand, with the Indiana Jones game, which is also in that sort of umbrella, from Bethesda MachineGames, who the folks that make the Wolfenstein games, going to make an Indiana Jones game, and it's going to be produced by Todd Howard. So a lot
starring Nathan Drake.
A lot of crazy stuff happening this week around Star Wars. Swinny, how do you take this if you're EA?
With some lube.
Jeez, right. Just go right in there. Just go right in there.
Go right in there. Nice and deep.
Well, you have to go in with it.
Well, it's rough.
Oh my god.
EA. Yeah, this is a huge hit for EA. I think but I see this as nothing but a positive for everyone else, because we're getting potentially, who knows what other developers might work on Star Wars games in the future, because we don't know. I don't think we know all the details of the arrangement between Ubisoft and Lucasfilm Games, but I'm assuming that it's probably on a per game basis at the moment, and at least until they see how this first one goes. But the fact that LucasArts, as I more fondly remember, and I think most people think of them as LucasArts, they're such a beloved studio for me. All their point and click stuff, especially, and just games like TIE Fighter and all the stuff that was not so much developed by them, but I still think of things like Rogue Squadron, Episode 1 Racer, and all that stuff that's kind of that's around my era, like 64 era. But obviously all the PC Star Wars games. So I said TIE Fighter, but like Dark Forces and Jedi Knight, which I do love.
Those were awesome games, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that it's returned to form for this stuff. And I know that Jedi Fallen Order was really well received, and I'm looking forward to playing it. And a lot of people love Star Wars Rogue Squadron and Battlefront 2. So I think they've really gotten...
EA Squadrons?
Battlefront 2.
No. You said Rogue Squadrons. You mean Star Wars
Squadrons.
Just Squadrons, yeah. Which, by the way, to interject, is free to play, I think, this weekend on Xbox.
I gave it to you, remember? It's part of the...
You gave it to me, but we spoke about this last week. I think that Sony have delayed the VR headset plug thing. So I'm waiting till I can get it on.
So you don't have a PS4 at all?
No, I don't, because I traded it for the PS5.
That's so annoying. Sorry.
So I think EA had gotten to a good place with it, but they struggled in those early days when they had all the cancelled games.
Yeah, 1313 most infamously, maybe you'd call it.
Yeah, but I think this is a great thing. And yeah, even if it's in brand name only, like I wish they would have brought back LucasArts as the brand name myself, but whatever. It makes sense.
Would it be weird? Imagine if your name, you were Swinny and you created Swinny Film and Swinny Arts, and then you completely relinquished control of that, and years later that brand comes back, like Swinny Film and Swinny Arts. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's like
super amazing, yeah. If you're a Lucas.
Yeah, like if you have such a strong brand yourself that I didn't even need to have anything to do with it, just my name being on the thing is enough. Yeah, and like a quick rant about George Lucas. Like so many people rip into him. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but then I don't really like a lot of the new stuff apart from the Mandalorian that's coming out. But the guy is an imaginative guy. Like
Oh yeah,
he's got a wild
he's a
imagination.
genius.
Yeah. So and he creates these insane worlds that don't make much sense, but they're so cool and so it's just childlike in a way.
But at the same time, he's very adult-like in the sense that he knows his business as well, and he knows how to market that stuff.
Oh
And he
yeah, with
knows
toys
how
and
to
everything like
get
that,
the
yeah.
most out of it. Yeah, he's nuts. I think he's a genius. He's amazing.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I totally.
I think my take on this,
guy.
and I think it's similar to you, Swinny, that, I feel like this whole change was seeded with Battlefront 2. Just the fact that Battlefront 2, how poorly that was received. And that was in like mainstream media. So this is the kind of stuff that, the film execs and Disney themselves would be getting a lot of feedback on. Just, the monetization of that game, the absolute backlash from gamers. I feel like from that point, they would have sat down and said, well, okay, we're going to change the model here. Because these games were selling well. Like, if I look at the financials, we didn't include it in the list of 4, but there's the Galaxy of Heroes mobile game that actually made the most amount of money out of all of these games. It made like over $1 billion, that mobile game.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. And then like Fallen Order, Battlefront, and Squadrons, they've all sold over 10 million copies, which is really good. Like if you're selling over 10 million for your game, you're doing well.
Play Fallen Order. It's really good.
Yeah, look, I'm waiting for Fallen Order to come on PC, Xbox Game Pass. So I would have already played that game because I'm actually really, really looking forward to playing that game.
It's really cool. It's like an easy version of Dark Souls. Kinda.
Oh, that sounds up my alley.
Well, it's like a Metroidvania kind of Dark Souls-y game. It'll be totally up your alley. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Very solid.
Yeah. And on the Indiana Jones game, so this is developed by folk who have only historically made first-person shooters. Like, do we think it's going to be a first-person shooter?
No, I doubt it. I think it's going to be a Tomb Raider / Uncharted kind of game. Have they shown anything? Are we making stuff up here?
I think you lose a lot by not taking advantage of the likeness of Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Also, just when we're talking traps and puzzles and stuff, like I think you lose a lot of that in first person. So
yeah, it works better in third person.
I feel like the whip is so iconic that the whip just doesn't work as well in first person. There's something about
weird.
like the size of it. I can just imagine the camera, like if you're whipping things, it's sort of like you could almost do pulling it out, like in terms of the camera and then pushing back in. Like there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with the whip that doesn't really make sense first person shooter. It just kind of worries me because it's like, a studio that, and we've had a really good example recently of a studio that's gone from always doing, over the shoulder style games to moving into a first person style game in Cyberpunk. And, a lot of gaps being there in terms of not really, I guess it's like coming up to speed is part of the challenge, right?
Yeah, but I feel like they did nail the first person perspective pretty well, given the scope of it. And the shooting mechanics solid, probably one of the best shooting mechanics out of any first person shooter game that I've seen. So given their lack of experience in that space, they've done an amazing job. The other thing they need to fix is the seating in the car. It feels like you're like 5 feet tall or something, or 4.5 feet tall when you're driving cars. It's way too low.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
You're like a little granny huddled behind the steering wheel. Hey, get out of my way, little. I'm sorry to any grannies that are listening to this podcast.
And Swinny,
I don't mean to offend you.
The big one, and I feel like a bit of the bastard love child of two things that we love, the Ubisoft game where we only know that it's an open world game at this stage and that they are hiring for folk to develop things that have like linear structure and then non-linear structure. So to me, it just sounds like an open world game.
Well, it sounds like The Division. Pretty much, like I think they've chosen probably the right studio for that, because when you think about, I guess Watch Dogs has combat in it, but Assassin's Creed generally, doesn't have gun combat. So, and I guess with Star Wars, it depends what the focus is. Is it, are you playing a Jedi? Are you not? So that really probably changes what combat mechanics might be. I think that has a lot of potential. Ubisoft obviously know what they're doing for open world games, and I think a Star Wars open world game could be a huge hit.
I think it'd be massive. It'd be awesome as well. I played the Division 1 and the Division 2 quite a lot, and I played a lot of the other Ubisoft games. But something in the end just left me feeling a bit empty. Like the game just became this repetitive loop because it's designed to do that. So I hope they don't do the same thing with this, where it's sort of a first-person open-world experience, but the reality is it's more all about the end game and the loot and playing with your friends and repeating the same bloody thing over and over again 100 times till you get bored. So I hope they don't go down that path. Well, we'll see. I mean, because I'd love to see like a Skyrim kind of Star Wars experience, like that kind of open world, where you can actually go around to different places, different planets, and really have that cool open world experience.
So you're saying they should have had Todd Howard be producing?
Yeah, it should have been the other way around, I reckon. Yeah, absolutely. I worry that if they're going to do anything like the Division in terms of the game format, it's going to be successful, but I feel like it's going to be successful for the wrong reasons.
Actually,
the game could have been so much cooler.
MachineGames making a new Dark Forces would have been pretty cool.
That would have been sick. Yeah, that would have been sick. Yeah, I mean, would you admit this, Swinny, that Ubisoft are a bit formulaic with their open world games? I think that's kind of like what you're also saying, Mike.
Oh, absolutely formulaic, yeah.
But no, very Swinny, do you think
Swinny should, yeah.
Do you think it's formulaic, or is that too harsh?
Oh, definitely. I think I can't talk much about Watch Dogs and The Division because I haven't played those series. But Far Cry, definitely the formula, they got to the point where, okay, it worked because they were selling a lot of those games, but I think people...
they're great games.
They're great games, but I think unless you're super into Far Cry and you love it each time, I could see how that structure and that gameplay loop could get a bit tiring. But I think you shouldn't play these games back to back. I think a few years, okay, I'm going to play an Assassin's Creed game every 2 years, then to me that feels like a good amount of time between those experiences. But yeah, definitely the Ubisoft formula is a thing. You can't, I think deny that.
I think that's got to be a selling point to Disney, because Disney, you look at all the Marvel films, everything like that, like generally they're pretty safe and formulaic in terms of their structure because, they want to make money. They're a huge mega corporation, the biggest.
Yep, they know what sells.
They're probably the biggest entertainment company in the world, right? Or up there at least in that conversation for sure, of course. But yeah, like I think for them, if they look around, they go, well, Ubisoft it's almost like they always get the same amount of sales for everything. And it's never really controversial. Like the biggest controversy I've ever seen with Assassin's Creed really is that they just keep making them every year. And then when they sort of announce they're going to start to space it out a bit, people are like, oh, great. But I don't really see a huge backlash against Assassin's Creed ever, personally at least. So
I'm just looking through Ubisoft's, let's say, last couple of years of games. They don't do a lot of, they've got such strong IP.
Yeah.
They don't do a lot of big license name games. It's interesting. This was almost a bit of a new thing for them, or at least in recent times. I'm just still looking through. I mean, they do some Star Wars stuff, but I'm looking at big AAA console releases and stuff. I'm probably missing one, but a lot of it's their own IP. So it's going to be interesting to see how they apply that formula to a license.
Well, the last thing I wanted to say before we move on to the next story, but I do think you'll see a bit of a comeback with these licenses because IP is just so hot right now. Like anything with a strong brand is just dominating in every space it's going into. So that's like also like video game IP, but then also on the other side, like Spider-Man, like comic book IP. It's just wherever they're placing the product, it's just selling like hotcakes. So I could imagine some of these really classic, just burnt into your brain IP, movie IP, they're going to really start to push that through again.
Oh, yeah, they'll keep flogging that horse. And look, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think New Orders is a good case where it's an IP that's been done so much, yet it's still a good game. Personally, I'm
Fallen
sort of
Order,
over the
sorry.
Fallen Order. Sorry,
I'm like, wait, New
Yeah, I was
Order?
like, what's New
Was
Order?
that a New Order game?
What? It's a wrestling game, and I don't know. Like,
It's an
I'm
80s
personally,
electronica game.
we've talked about this before offline, I think. As someone who enjoyed Star Wars growing up, I'm over the formula. I'm over the whole universe. Give me something fresh. Give me something new, something different. Stop rehashing the same thing. And that's why, The Mandalorian, I became really cynical. And I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I wasn't the biggest fan of it in the end because it felt like the executive sat down and went, okay, how do we continue selling this IP? Well, let's make, a Baby Yoda. Brilliant. That's going to sell like hotcakes. Nerds alike are going to love that. They're going to buy t-shirts. Even if they're not into it, they'll buy t-shirts. I know people who aren't even into Star Wars that well, and they have bloody Mandalorian Baby Yoda t-shirts because they think it's cute.
Yeah, it is.
It's brilliant marketing. It's brilliant marketing.
It is,
but I feel like ultimately, the reason why those things get created is just to make money and just to, flog the IP, as opposed to because they really want to create that, in which case they probably would have come up with something completely new and fresh. But why come up with something new and fresh when you can, it's a safe bet, there's a cash cow, let's just keep going down that path.
And we now remove you from our scheduled mic rant for the week to move on to the next topic.